Hello class, I just wanted to put together some refresher videos to cover some of the basic concepts that we've covered in class this term so far. This kind of will help you maybe serve as a reference or a resource material for going back and maybe catching up on some things you didn't quite understand. I'm going to use the ball scene that I put together for the class as a source for this demo. So here we are looking at the ball scene. The first thing I want to do is actually pull up my outliner. This is just so that I can see, the contents of the scene, and that'll kind of come into play with some of the stuff that we do later on. Now, if you recall, the first thing actually that we did was we just did some very simplistic rigging, basically creating a hierarchy of objects that would ultimately control the movement of this ball. Some of the sort of core principles behind rigging is that you want to make sure that the animators can't actually access the geometry that is being animated. You don't want them to actually start. You don't want them to set keyframes on this stuff. So one of the things that one of the first things you do when you start rigging, you select the object that you want to start rigging. And you can pull up your channel editor, and over here on the right you can see that everything here is zeroed out, and everything is locked, which is great. Sometimes you'll be modeling. Your modelers will forget. They'll scale up an object and then forget to zero it out before they send it to you. You always want to kind of do these checks before you get started, just to make sure that you don't get too far and then realize you've got something horribly wrong. So select the ball. You can see over here in the channel editor, everything is zeroed out, which is great. The next thing I want to do is I want to set up my scenes, my scene layers. Now we've got a scene layer here for lights, and that's great. I want to actually just create a scene layer for the ball. So I'm going to go ahead and create, click on this, which creates a new layer and assigns the selected object to the layer. So I'm going to call this layer ball. Very creative. I'll make it red. And so now if I turn off, I can turn the ball on and off using the scene layer. We're going to use simple control objects to manipulate the ball animation as a part of this tutorial. As we sort of start building the hierarchy, whether or not all of your controls are visible or not will kind of, well, we can go into this later, but as you guys may recall, even if we have the hierarchy of controls, given that the ball will ultimately be the last child object in this sort of chain of control objects, if you hide your control objects, the ball will go with it. So just prepare yourself, that's going to happen. And that's okay. This is really more for getting used to kind of learning about parenting and hierarchical relationships. So when you are rigging, I think generally it's a good idea to do it from an orthogonal view. So generally the side or the front is a good way to start. And the first thing actually that I want to do is, well, actually I'm going to back up. The first thing that I want to do is create a control that will, that's going to serve as sort of our root control object. So I'm going to go to the top-down view. I'm going to go over here to Create, Curve Tools, CV Curve Tool. I'm going to click my Options box, and in here I'm going to say one linear. That's fine. Close. And then I'm going to actually just draw, and again, I'm kind of skipping a little bit because I'm trying to combine a couple of things here together. But as you may recall, you can create sort of these custom controls. So I'm going to lock, I'm going to do a grid snap, and I'm going to start creating my control. I'll do that again. And you can kind of make this look however you like. 2, 2. You know, you get the hang of it. And I'm just creating these so this isn't quite even, so let me just go in here really quick. Whoops. And grab this. I'm gonna snap this here. So it's 2, 2. That's 1, 2, 3. Oh. And that's pretty close. All right. So now what I have, if I look in my perspective view, I have sort of the root control object. Now, one of the things that you also want to make sure is that your control objects kind of symbolize what they're supposed to do, what function, what kind of animation function that they serve. So as you can tell, based on this control, there is this control is going to be designed to move the ball along the XZ axis. So nothing in the Y-axis. And so you can see over here in my outliner, it's called curve 1. We're going to call this control underscore root. And I'm going to go ahead and, with that selected, I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to create a layer and add that object to it. And I'm just going to call these control.